I'm Ron Schutz. I blog, I write books. I've been in the financial services industry for over 5 decades, which equates to today about 110,000 hours that I've been at this. I hope you find each of these videos informative and thought-provoking. My goal was to make them educational. I hope I achieved that objective. Thank you for watching. So, cutting expenses. I'm going to talk a little bit about specific fences or benchmarks that we should put up to say, thou shalt only. Increase revenues. It's been proven time and time again, when you lower the tax rates, the government actually collects more money because more individuals are willing to take risks, which generate ultimately revenue for the government if they're at all successful. And finally, to encourage job creation, because if people have a job, guess what? They spend money. It's pretty simple. This was particularly proven during Reagan's era with he and Tip O'Neill. Tip O'Neill was a Democrat House Speaker, but they were able to come together and come up with essentially was a flat tax of 28%. If you made over $28,000 a year, you paid a flat rate of 28%. And that was set a boom in place that lasted for several decades of our country because of those flat taxes that were done. So in cutting expenses, I think we should set a maximum of 10% mandatory and 5% discretionary of the gross domestic production. That's the GDP. That's the sum of all the goods and services produced in the country. Think of it as your annual paycheck. So if you have 100 as the size of the GDP, you have $10 that goes towards mandatory expenses and $5 that goes towards discretionary types of expenses. And the way you start is reducing government departments. We have the government so heavily involved currently that in our society and in our world that we have a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of regulations that really limit creativity of people. I like to follow what's called the 80-20 rule. So you spend 80% of what you take in and you save 20%. In this case, we have the 26, almost 27 trillion of debt now, so that 20% would have to be applied towards trying to reduce or bring that debt down. And also, I like to keep numbers simple, that has to be paid off in a matter of less than 20 years. So, and then in simplifying the taxes, would be my plan. Again, the 10 and 5, a total of 15 of GDP, is the maximum you can spend. Remember my clothing allowance for a teenager, same kind of an idea. So, first of all, you'd have deduction by zip codes, because in different zip codes, currently the deduction is standard across the country, one size fits all. Well, if you live in Montana or northern Minnesota or places like that where there's a very low cost of living and for $100,000 you get a really nice place, that's one thing. But if you live in Houston for $100,000, you don't get very much. If you live out in California for $100,000, maybe you get a postage stamp. I'm not sure. It's always amazes me when I go to California and see the prices people pay for their homes. But you'd get a deduction based on what it costs to live out there for food, clothing, and shelter. There are a lot of statistics available to accomplish this. Today, it's a little over $1,000 per person per month. For the 90 percentile, if your income is 90 percentile or less, that next segment would pay a 10% rate. So again, if your income is roughly $12,000 a month or less, you'd be paying a 10% rate after you got your deductions. For those of us that are blessed to be in the top 10%, we would pay double. We would pay a flat 20% rate on all our income above the 90 percentile. So if you are fortunate enough to be up here, your tax would be higher than somebody who was here because of the levels that you are, but the rate would be identical for that above this. So 90% of us would pay 10, 10% of us would pay 20. Very simple, very easy. For me, the number one department would be the Department of Education. I think education is a local item. I believe that Schools have some competition. Obviously homeschooling now, we're seeing other types of things, charter schools, etc. But our educational system hasn't changed in many decades, 100 years basically. We still live as though we live in an agrarian society. I personally think the kids should go to school all year long with breaks during the year, but not a whole summer off. All the other developed countries have done away with that for the most part, and we keep falling down in scores that comparable kids do. So we live in a society that requires education today, and if you're not inclined towards that, I think the German model is very good, where those that want to go off and do professions of welding and mechanics rather, etc., where it requires more of the use of your hands, it's great. I don't know if you all have had a plumber lately, but the last experience I had with a plumber, I could have bought a nice used car for what I had to pay for that plumber. So those are good professions, and then you still need people that are more academically inclined. Those should be encouraged, but the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. should not be deciding that decision. In Houston, Texas, the HISD school system is spending $2 billion. $2 billion. I remember when that was the total amount of money the government spent. So again, I think this is more of a local issue. The state of Florida has opened up opportunities so that if people that are lesser economically challenged, or more economically challenged rather, can go to charter schools by getting chits from the state to help them get into schools that the parents feel are better. That's the kind of model I think we should be seeing, and not having the government involved in this kind of area. So what does this look like? It looks like this. The central government collects taxes, the IRS, most of them they think of it as theirs. Again, the limits are 10% mandatory, 5% discretionary, and 85% of the GDP falls down to be spent by individuals, by corporations, and capitalists. You know, think of it this way: you go to a restaurant and they give you tips. I remember when it used to be 15%, now it seems to have creeped up to 18 or 20%. That's your decision as to how you think that wait staff helped you. But this is a rule that I think is good as 85-15. You know, if we can make a decision, we're able to do better in our decisions, because our self-interests drive us. And I work a lot with entrepreneurs. I see that they really, for the most part, have a heart for their employees and for their customers, and they appreciate what that really means for them. Whereas, I don't know about you, but if you've dealt with a bureaucrat in the federal government, it can be really challenging. They act like they're doing us a favor when we ask them for help. So my 85, 10, and 5 is what I'm recommending here.